The ANC has a bold strategy to win the election in 2024. What it's going to do is cut all spending and basically give the poor their 350 Rand grant.
In essence, in order to fund the 350 Rand grant, which by the way is a globalist plot to have universal basic income in South Africa, it wants to cut everything the poor use so that the ANC can afford to give the poor 350 Rand per month. Now, Byron, we are in favor of austerity, but they really are going for broke here.
So what we are is actually anti-wasting money on useless shit. Gordon Gwana came out and basically said, the ANC has a problem. What it does is it continues to think it can easily fund things the same way it has in the past because of the commodity booms and the taxation that occurred on commodities, which allowed revenues to overrun. In the past, there has been a bit of a deficit, but kind of a bit of a surplus. We're not in that state anymore. What we are now is actually in a state where the budget is just fucked. We have ongoing energy problems. We have rampant crime and corruption. And on top of that, the logistics services are absolutely fucked. I mean, just look at Prasa.
Every day, Transnet loses 8 billion Rand for the South African economy because they can't transport anything on the railways. Every time there's stage 4 load shedding in the country, we lose another billion Rand. When you have load shedding for an entire year, like we are doing so in South Africa right now, and when Transnet does not have any railway lines whatsoever, you are losing billions and billions of rands in revenue for the state every single day. And guess what, Byron? Like anything, you go bankrupt very slowly, and then all of a sudden, the economic fiscal cliff has finally hit South Africa, and the only one who seems to really care about this is, thankfully, the finance minister, because the finance minister is saying, in this time of election, everyone wants to spend money to buy votes, but you know what, guys? There's no more money to spend.
The South African economy grew by a whole 0.4% to be exact. But you know what really came as a surprise to the government, Shimon? Apparently this came from the private sector. And it was mainly due to the growth in rooftop solar, which people have used to, fund their businesses and their homes. So it's very curious that the government's like, hi, boo, check this out. The private sector grew the economy. Like, it's blowing their mind. Why this is important is because Gordon Gwana was asked in the weekend by, Propaganda 24, what he thought of the NHR. And he basically said, I don't like it. In fact, if you look at a lot of the civil servants, such as the police, they don't like it either. He says we already have universal healthcare in the form of public hospitals. Why don't we just improve them?
The moment a member of the ANC says something very reasonable, everyone's like, oh, wow, reforms on the horizon, ladies and gentlemen. No, that is not the case. I mean, the fact that the Minister of Finance is the only one that actually understands anything is, a great indictment on the ANC itself. But he makes two very good points. Number one, there really is universal healthcare. It's called the public health system. It exists. Whether it works or not is a separate issue altogether. But number two, ideologically, you want to get rid of the private sector in medical care. Do you ban the private sector? Do you nationalize the private sector? Or, here's, something way off left field, you just improve the public health sector to such a degree where medical aids are not even necessary. According to the Minister of Finance, he approves of improving the public sector so much that medical aids are not really required in South Africa. And we happen to agree with him as well. Why ban something when you can just improve the one thing that you're responsible for?
Absolutely. And if you think about the logics there, I mean, who the hell wants to pay for private medical aid if you know that the government hospitals were actually pretty good? Because if they were pretty good, you'd all go, I'm not paying for that. I get that for free.
I mean, how hard is it just to have a railway that works? Britain solved it in 1850. But anyway, Gordon Gwana also says something very interesting. He says, you know what? We have no more money, so we only have three options. Increase taxes, which is basically impossible, borrow more, which is basically impossible, or cut the budget, which is politically impossible. So it really is a Mexican standoff. No one's willing to budge. He forgot number 4, which is hyperinflate the currency. But even the ANC doesn't seem to have the appetite to do that at the moment.
So the ANC is not that far away from election, and they're out of strategies, which may be why Gordon Gwana has just come out there and just said, well, what we all know. He said, you guys want me to fund bullshit programs to win the election? I can't, there's no money. He says, you guys want me to do all this crazy shit like NHR? I can't, it's a waste of cash. So you forgot, Ramon, there is a fifth option, which is Gordon Gwana gets fired, or he gets removed from office. They stick some other puppets in place. They tell him, here's what you have to do, go and do it.
So, Byron, if Enoch Godongwana is fired for being normal, for being a reasonable person, who would you want in his place then? Come on, play with me.
There's no one there, mate. That's the problem. There's no one else to bid there. I mean, in an ideal world, you get Trevor Emmanuel back, right? So there aren't any options. The NC's out of options. He was the last guy, mate. He was the last guy who wanted the job.
And now that he's the last guy at the job, facing an inevitable fiscal cliff with no room to maneuver anywhere, I would hate to be in the ANC right now. I hope they're okay.